In this video, we're going to carry on with the scenario we started in the last video and go ahead and code the function, or actually functions that we talked about. So just to remind you, our scenario is basically creating a card game where users are going to flip a card versus the computer. Highest card is going to win. We listed out a bunch of discrete tasks we need to do, and we decided we're gonna start with the randomizer. That's a thing that seems doable with the knowledge that we have so far. We're going to start with that core functionality of choosing those random numbers. I mentioned that we also know how to CSS code and do some HTML coding. So I'm going to start us off with a template that just has that part done, just for the sake of ease. You're welcome to code that in any way you want, or to use the template that's provided, because I really want to focus in on the new thing, which is the JavaScript, rather than worry about the old stuff, which is the HTML, CSS. Okay, let's go ahead and write some code. So as you can see, we have I have a couple of cards there. I've got computer card, your card. I have a little button to click for your card, which does nothing right now. And then I have this key here to explain how numerical values correlate to card values. Now, eventually, we're going to want to code that in so that people don't have to do this decoding. But we're just starting small with this core functionality of picking the cards, right? Creating a randomizer that's going to pick the cards and putting that value on these cards on the screen. So we're going to move away from using that alert box, which honestly I only use for error checking in my programs, and move into the functionality of actually writing some content on the screen, actually writing some content on the HTML page. So that's going to be a good thing we're going to do here. So obviously on our page here, we've got a bunch of CSS that just governs this. I did want to show you that you can apply CSS to the button tag, which, as I mentioned, might be a new tag for you. So you absolutely can do that. I could, change the font. I could do all those sort of CSS things with that button, and it kind of automatically has that clickable functionality, so we can use our onClick event to call our function, which is what we're eventually going to do. So that's the CSS that's going to correlate to this content, and I'm sure you can see the page content. Now, I do want to point out a couple of features in my HTML. So right here, this code here creates these empty card spaces. And notice I've used this property, the ID property, to give each of these a name. Now, every single HTML tag can take the ID property. It's a universal property, much like class is a universal property, can be applied to any HTML tag. The ID property is super important because it allows us to target and identify and target a certain element on our HTML page by basically giving it a name. So I tried to give it names that would be memorable and descriptive. In this case, computer card, to say, like, this is the one that's for the computer, and then your card, the one for the user, right? So those names, they're easy. I use the same naming convention as you would with classes, all lowercase, smushed together, no spaces, all that good stuff. So that's important that we've given those names. And then notice we have our button. I have I've given a name start game. So eventually we're going to have to make a function called start game to actually begin the process of making this work. I've also put some script tags down here for us to start our coding. So let's go ahead and start with our randomizer, because that was the first thing that we could kind of envision that we knew how to do. So I'm going to start by making it called randomizer. I am going to take in a parameter, because remember when we used the math_random method in the numeric values video, we talked about how that returns a value between 0 and 1. And so if we want that to actually come out with, with numbers, with integer numbers, we need to multiply it by a value, right? So we definitely want to bring in a parameter that's going to be the maximum for the scale. So we know we're going to need one parameter, which is going to be the value for the scale of our randomization. How high do we want those random numbers to be, right? So we definitely want to do that. And then, as I mentioned, we want our squiggly brackets to start and end. Okay, so now let's make a local variable y, and let's make that the one that's going to hold our random value. And remember, we want to multiply our factor, our scaling factor, times math random, which is going to be our value between 0 and 1. So y is going to be our raw random number. Let's make a variable random number that is going to be the integer version, and then we can return random. So that will be our randomizing function. Now, we can't test this code quite yet because we don't have anything, we haven't sent the parameter, right? So now, once we've written this function, we're like, okay, I think I got a handle on the randomization. We realize there's got to be some way of sending it that value of x. So let's create another function. And I'm not sure if it's going to need a parameter just yet, but we have to have a function that's actually going to call the randomizer and turn those values. And remember, we need actually two values. We need a value for the suit, and that's the 0 through 3, if you remember that on the HTML side. And then we need a value for the card, and they have different scales, right? One is just through 4 or 3 because computers start with 0, and the other one is through 14, which would be through to our base. So the function getCard, we basically need to call the randomizer, and we need to do it with two different values. So let's go ahead and make a variable. Let's call it suit for the, and then we know it's the suit. And let's go ahead and call our function randomizer and give it the value of 3. So that's going to be the maximum of the scale. And then let's do one for card and give it a value of 13 for the maximum of that scale. So we have our variables, and now we have suit, we have card. So now we want to be able to put those together into a single string, right? And if you recall, if you take a variable, even if it's a numeric variable, but you use it with the concatenation as if it is a string, it's just going to turn it into a string value. So there, let's call it full card equals suit plus, we'll stick a space in there, plus card. Suit plus a space plus card. That's going to give us the full card. So once again, this is going to be in a very, very raw form. And as we continue writing this program in the next couple of modules, we're going to want to refine that so that people don't have to use a key in order to figure out what their card is. They'll just be able to see, 10, a spade, and then the 10 or whatever it is, right? So that's our get card, is basically using our randomizer. So calling this function, giving it a value, and then generating a variable that is the entire card. So now we can actually test our coding at this point because we have something that we could report out. We could create an alert. And I mentioned we are going to move away from using the alert, but just for the sake of testing at this point, we're going to do that. And then if we use get card here, and we don't actually need to pass any parameters into getCard. Okay, so that's a 1 and a 1. So that would be a club and a 2 is what this would be. And if we do it again, we should see, right, there's a club and a 10. There is a spade and a 3, or sorry, that was a jack. A club and a jack, a heart and an 8, right? So everything's going to be a +1, right? So yeah, so one thing we could do, we could just add our +1 here, and then we should be able to put these back to the values that we recognize. Okay, so sorry, this is a little bit messy, but this is how coding works, is you kind of work through problems as you're doing your coding and as you see your results. So now we've got a diamond and a 2. Suits, it doesn't matter so much, right? It doesn't matter if that's a 1, 2, 3, 4 or 0, 1, 2, 3, but because these are actual values, it does make more sense to do the +1 here in the code. And then we know that's a 6 and not a 7, right? That's going to be a much more sensible way to do it, I think. And we see that our randomizer is working just fine. We're getting our integer values, and we're getting 1 for each thing. And doesn't seem to be going outside of our scope and our scale. So that all looks good. Now, we want to get rid of this alert. I need to create something so that I'll actually place the value in here of my card. And then I also want to do the computer's card right after that, so that then we're ready to do the comparison. We need one more line of code up here, and that is return full card. Okay, so we need one more function to call getCard twice. Once to provide the card for the user, once to provide the card for the computer. So let's create one more function. Start game. And then we're going to put a line of code like this. And let me explain what this is. And remember, this goes back to, and let's change this guy while we're up here. This goes back to what I talked about in terms of providing an ID, creating a name for these two elements that are basically the blank card. So this is an object. The document object is basically one of those self-referential objects that we talked about a while back in module 1, and so it's referring to this current document. It's using the method getElementById, and look at this property is called ID, and then it's giving the explicit ID, in this case your card, which is the name that we came up with, and then telling it to target, and this is a property, inner HTML. So that just means the stuff in between the two HTML tags. Whatever's in there, replace it with this that's coming. So we just have it blank right now, and then it will replace it with the value of getCard, and the value of getCard is going to be this string that is the suit plus a space plus card. So we'll do that for your card, and then we'll do that for the computer card. And this is a different way of providing output to a user that's really a lot better than an alert, because think about it. If you're actually coding this onto the HTML page itself, now you can apply all kinds of CSS styles to whatever is that information that we're generating. Okay, so let's go ahead and test this out. And there we go. And if I hit it again, and again, and again, and again, and again. And so now you can see we've got two values, and now it would be possible to compare those and say who's the winner, right? So we've accomplished our goal of creating the randomizer, generating values for a card that include the suit and the number, and then writing that onto the HTML page. And notice this does have some CSS formatting on it. And like I said, we could format that in any way we wish, using whatever CSS properties we want. So you can see that the possibilities now become really cool. And this also, now that we've got this in two different values, and the value is essentially kind of stored on the page, we could grab those values from the page and run a comparison.